and others will join along the way. Welcome, everyone, to those that are joining us to our Innovation Grand Rounds for October. I'm Stephen Beaupart, Executive Associate Dean and our Chief Diversity Officer for our Carle, Illinois College of Medicine. And these Grand Rounds are really meant to bring us together to kind of celebrate, to hear some of our local faculty and sometimes external speakers as well, who are really pushing the edge in terms of technology and medicine as it applies to health and wellness. That's why I think today you're really in for a treat to hear from Professor Wendy Rogers, who's the Kahn Professor of Applied Health Sciences here on campus. She's has her primary appointment in our Department of Kinesiology and Community Health in the College of Applied Health Sciences. But also she has appointments in educational psychology. She's an affiliate at the Beckman Institute, Illinois Informatics Institute, Center for Social and Behavioral Science, and Discovery Partners Institute. And clearly this work that she'll share with us today on technology and health and aging is something that we all can relate to. I don't think you'll tell us that there's a technology that can prevent aging, but it's something that's certainly technology that can help us as we all face that fate. Professor Rogers is also director of the Health Technology Education Program, the McKechnie Family Life Home, which she'll talk about today, as well as CHART, which stands for Collaborations in Health, Aging, Research and Technology, and is also PI of the Human Factors in Aging Laboratory. So with support from NIH and a number of other institutions and agencies, you can see that the themes are going to permeate between health, aging, and technology. So with that, we're very much looking forward to your presentation, and welcome. And I'll turn that over to you, Professor Rogers.
Great, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it's fun to see everybody popping in. I recognize some names, so I know there are friendly faces out there, even though I won't be able to see you while I'm presenting. I will go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay, excellent. I'm going to assume, Steve, could you nod? Can you see everything?
Yes, that looks good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And this is our official lab template for presentations, and we have at the bottom all members of our family. So it's nice to have them along when we make our presentations. As Steve mentioned, I wear a lot of different hats. And so what I want to do today is cover a broad swath of the different things I do here at the University of Illinois. Won't go into a lot of depth about everything, but perhaps if you're interested, I can come back another time and talk in more detail. But given that this is my first time presenting to the college, I wanted to give a sense of the different things that I do. So I'll start with, I'll work my way through and talk about CHART, talk about my lab, which is located here in the Kahn Annex. And then I'll talk about the McKechnie Family Life Home, as well as the Health Technology and Education Program, which we've just started. So let us begin with statistics. We all know that the populations are getting older worldwide. I like this graphic that the WHO came out with that shows the percentage of people over the age of 60. Now, one thing that's interesting to think about is when we talk about older adults, what does that mean? The WHO defines that as over the age of 60. Typically in the US, we define it as over age 65. So in my slides, you'll sometimes see 60 plus, you'll sometimes see 65 plus, but 60 plus is the WHO definition. And this graphic shows, what the world looked like in 2015. The blue color, the medium blue, is 10 to 30% of the population was over age 60 at that time. And what's striking is when you look at this shift into the future of 2050, where you're going to see segments of the world where more than 30% of their population is over the age of 60. And for students, medical students, designers, that's who your users are going to be. Even if you don't think you're an expert in aging, your population is going to include older adults. One of my students made this graphic for us just for the state of Illinois, which I think is great, pulling from some data from the Illinois Department on Aging. And you see the red box is Champaign County. And what's happening is over time that our population is also increasing such that we're going to be close to 25% of our county over the age of 60. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about who your patients, your users, your target audience might be. I also strongly recommend looking at the World Report on Aging and Health that was put out by the World Health Organization. It's a very helpful summary. I'm going to show a couple of their slides about some of the issues we need to be paying attention to. I always like to point out that the person who did the artwork for the cover was age 81. And so I think that was very fitting that they chose an artist who was also an older adult to put on the cover. One of the things that they emphasize is that healthy aging is an investment and not a cost. And so if you think about what are we investing in, we need to invest in health systems, long-term care systems, but also things like lifelong learning, age-friendly environments, social protections. These investments are going to yield very clear benefits in terms of health, skills and knowledge, mobility, social connectivity, financial security, personal dignity, safety and security. A lot of clear benefits that will then in turn have returns, both personal, community, and economic return. If you think about well-being, workforce participation, but even just purchasing and consumption. Continued investments and innovation that our older adults can bring, social and cultural contributions, as well as social cohesion. And I like the overall goal, and this is one of my goals for my own research, is maximizing functional ability. However, we may do that, and technology is one potential way to do that. So WHO identified these 4 priority areas for action. One is, if we're going to really understand and help older adults in our community, we really need to understand what their needs are. We need to improve our ways of measuring, monitoring, and really understanding what specific needs are. We need to think about the people who are old now. How do we support their needs? We need to also think about changing needs over time. How do we develop long-term care system and ensure that everyone can grow old in an age-friendly environment? And you may or may not know, but WHO has designated this current decade as the decade of healthy aging, starting in 2020, which is somewhat ironic given what's happening to older adults around the world right now. But that is their focus, which is great. And I think what that means is it calls attention to issues of aging around the world and thinking about some of these different priority areas. And that's really what drives some of the goals behind CHART. And I want to call out my partner in crime here, Brian Pastor, who's the program coordinator for CHART. CHART is a research theme in the College of Applied Health Sciences, but it's really an interdisciplinary research program. And we have people from across campus, as well as community members, industry partners, healthcare providers, all with this common goal to promote aging successfully through technology. And it takes interdisciplinary teams to be successful in this kind of research effort. And so we have a mission, thinking about successful aging through research, through development, but also paying attention to the needs of education, providing guidance for policy decision-making. And one of the things I'm personally very passionate about is making sure that we're translating these efforts to positively affect the lives of older adults. I've been in this business for, I said the other night at dinner that I've been in this business for 20 years, and my husband pointed out, no, you've been in this business for 30 years. So I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of things developed that don't get transitioned or translated out to actually help people. We do great work at universities. We need to make sure that we're sharing our findings, doing the translational science that's necessary to implement these things. So we have core values, which again are things that we believe we should all be thinking about. How do we transform aging? How do we ensure that we maintain positive views that we are inclusive and person-centered in our design efforts, thinking about issues of equity and reducing disparities, providing affordable, available, high quality, and effective. And I'm going to show you a couple of randomized controlled trials that we're doing right now to actually show the effectiveness of these solutions. We do research with older adults, not for them. So older adults are engaged in everything that we do. And if we're going to be successful in this translation that I was mentioning, we need to be integrated with industry, with agencies, with policymakers. We also need to think internationally in terms of our scope and our impact. And by design, we are interdisciplinary and collaborative. So we focus on 4 intersecting domains in short. So healthcare, human factors, aging, and technology. And I'm going to switch now and talk about my lab, which is the Human Factors and Aging Laboratory. And this is our website. I invite you to go look at it to see more information about what we're doing. The focus is broadly on human factors and aging. And I'm not sure if everybody has a good sense of what I mean when I use the term human factors. Let me just define that. It's the study of the characteristics of people, but in context. It's people interacting with products, with environments, with equipment. It's thinking about their needs and capabilities when we're designing systems or devices, but also when we're developing training and instructions, as well as designing the environments in which they will be using the technology. Short label, when you hear human factors, is designing for human use. Another term that's used often in Europe and Asia is ergonomics. Those are similar, human factors and ergonomics. Sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. Now, in the human factors and aging lab, we're specifically focusing on abilities, limitations, needs, and preferences of older adults and designing with them, as I emphasized. Thinking about both usable and useful products. That's an important distinction. Just because something is usable doesn't mean I would find it useful. Making sure that we provide effective training and instruction, which is often overlooked in the design of anything, but in particular in the design of technologies. And that's critically important. And then thinking about how best do we deploy and introduce these new technologies. Again, this idea of translation and implementation. How do we broaden our scope and our scale? So thinking about what successful aging is, this is an interesting term. I define it as functioning effectively and independently, maintaining personal autonomy, retaining and enhancing abilities, managing health, both chronic conditions and wellness, remaining socially engaged and participating in one's community, and in short, maximizing an individual's quality of life. And I introduce you to my parents here. They are dancing at their 50th wedding anniversary. And so they're my inspirations for successful aging. They're no longer with us, but you'll see them in all of my presentations because seeing their faces always makes me smile. Here they are again. When we think about successful aging, we need to think about what is it that older adults have to do on a daily basis. So there's a standard category that's called activities of daily living. These are the basics: bathing, eating, drinking, mobility. What do I have to do to be able to live, basically? Another category is called instrumental activities of daily living. And these are things like preparing meals, paying bills, managing your medications, maybe maintaining the home. They tend to have a little bit more of a cognitive component. The activities of daily living tend to be more physical activities. When I first started working in this area of understanding aging, these were the main categories that were focused on, as if this was all older adults wanted to do, right? Is basic activities and instrumental activities. And so we actually coined a term back in 1998 that is enhanced activities of daily living. And this encompasses everything else, right? Social communication, hobbies, new learning, continuing to work or volunteer, participating in your community. These are the things that I think contribute to the quality of life. Of course, we need to be able to do ADLs and IADLs, but we want to be able to do EADLs. And so when we think about aging and activities and what we need to support, we need to think broadly about all of these things. In the Human Factors and Aging Lab is affiliated with 3 different centers. I just want to introduce you to them briefly, but also to say that we're always open to collaboration. That's part of the fun part of my job, is I get to collaborate with a lot of different people. The CREATE Center was founded in 1999, so we've been funded in 5-year increments since then. We're under review right now for CREATE 5. And CREATE stands for the Center for Research and Education on Aging and Technology Enhancement. You'll see a lot of acronyms. I like my acronyms. But the CREATE Center focuses on what's going to happen to all of us. As we get older, what changes and how might we design technology to support those everyday activities, like I just listed. Another center that was founded in 2013 is called Taxage, which is technologies to support aging in place for people with long-term disabilities. This center is funded by NIDLR, National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research. And our focus here is on people who are growing older with a hearing impairment or a vision impairment or a mobility impairment. And this subset of the population is often underserved. And so we focus on understanding their needs and designing technologies to support them. Just last year, we started another center called Enhance, Center for Enhancing Neurocognitive Health, Abilities, Networks, and Community Engagement, also funded by NIDLR. Here, our focus is on individuals who are aging with cognitive impairment. So mild cognitive impairment, traumatic brain injury, or post-stroke cognitive impairment. Those are our target populations. So we're really trying to cover the whole range of needs of people as they're getting older. This is the CREATE framework for technology design, and it comes out of a book that we wrote. And I wanted to show you, just to help you think about how we approach every technology, every problem that we're studying, is we think about it in terms of a system. And so the older adult is at the center. And so we need to understand, who are we designing for? What are their demographic and psychographic characteristics? What are their perceptual and motor capabilities? What are their cognitive capabilities? And if we're designing a technology, we need to recognize that the technology has certain characteristics that are going to impose demands on the users. Likewise, the task that I'm trying to complete, if you think about it as a healthcare task, is going to vary in terms of complexity, familiarity, collaboration. To it's something I'm working on together with my healthcare provider. Are there time stressors? So the tasks themselves also impose demands. And so we need to think of this contextually, but also recognize that all of these things take place in environments. So they're in a particular physical environment that has certain characteristics. They're in a particular sociocultural environment that also has certain characteristics. So one of the hallmarks of human factors is thinking about a system and all of the different components of the system. And then those apply no matter what activity domain we're talking about. And these are the general categories that we focus on in the CREATE Center. One thing that I like to emphasize is there is no typical older person. So there are vast differences across people in their health, their functional status, cultural background, race, ethnicity, education, income, literacy, where they live, what they've done, whether they like technology, whether they have experience with technology, attitudes, personality. All of these things differ. And as you grow older, they tend to differ more because different people have had different experiences over time. So we have to think about, there's no such thing as the older person or the elderly. we like to use the term older adults, plural. And you may think about groups of older adults who share certain characteristics, but it's always important to remember this diversity that you have. It is true that in general, certain things change as people grow older. So you tend to have more chronic health conditions. There are changes in your mobility, in your vision, in your hearing. There are cognitive changes. There may also be changes in your opportunity for social interaction, or there may be increased support needs. So there are certain general things that change with age that we need to consider in our design process. I also like to emphasize what the prevalence rate is for dementia. I think out in the world, people generally think that rates of dementia are a lot higher than they actually are. And so this graphic that came out a few years ago, was published in American Psychologist, shows the prevalence of dementia across the different age groups. Whoops, sorry. And if we look at up to age 79 or so, only, and I don't mean to diminish the fact that you could also say fully 10% of the population has dementia, but the other side of that is 90% of the population does not. And I think there are a lot of age stereotypes and assumptions about the prevalence of dementia. And even if you go out to age 84, you're starting to see that increase. Right now we're up to 20%. And when we get out into above age 80, we see increases to almost 40%. But it's important for us to remember this whole big section of the population at these younger ages that are out functioning in the world. They may have some challenges, but they don't have dementia. I want to show just a couple of statistics. I'm setting the context for the design things that we're doing about technology use. And so this graphic comes from the Pew Center, the Internet and American Life Project. And this shows over time the percentage of people who are using the internet. And what you see, not surprisingly, is the younger adults are right up there, where nearly 100% are using the internet. The next age group is similar, but even at age 50, you're seeing lower than 90%. And for that 65 plus, it's lower than 70%. And I think this graphic just shows internet use. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is how they're using the internet. The younger groups tend to use it for a wide variety of things, where the older adults are using it for less varied things. So that's a reality, right? If you're designing for that age group, they don't even have internet experience, or access is something else to keep in mind. Another piece of data from the Pew Internet and American Life Survey relates to using something new. So they asked older adults, they asked people of all ages, when I get a new electronic device, I usually need someone else to set it up or show me how to use it. And so they said, how well does this describe you? And the participants answered, and what I'm showing here is those who said it described them either very well or somewhat well. And I think one thing that's interesting to note is even the young group, 18% of them are saying, yeah, I usually need somebody to help me set up new devices. That's important to keep in mind. Even more striking is as you look at the older age groups. So when you get out to the 65 plus, fully 73% of them are saying they need somebody to help them set up a new technology. We have to be aware of that. Goes back to the point I was making earlier about training and instructional support and facilitating conditions. These are things we need to attend to. The last bit of data I want to show you about technology comes from my colleague, Wally Boot, who designed an assessment of mobile device proficiency. So imagine you have a new app that you're going to give to older adults, and you want to gauge, well, how much training and how much instructional support are they going to need? You can give them this assessment, and it tells you what their proficiency is in using mobile devices. And so we have proficiency here for younger adults, and these were mostly college students. And you see them all up here pretty high up and clustered. Look at the older adults, though, how diverse their proficiency is. But at the same time, compare across age groups. You have some people in the young group whose proficiency level is lower than many people in the older adult group. So you cannot assume just because somebody's a young person, they're proficient with using mobile devices. Likewise, you can't assume if they're an old person, they don't have proficiency. And to my point earlier about the diversity, here are some people that are the same age, right? They're in their 70s. These folks have very low proficiency. These folks have very high proficiency. So we really need to understand what people's abilities are to be able to design better for them or to provide the appropriate instruction. So one of the things we found over many studies is there are a lot of different barriers to technology adoption. And you're already hearing my theme. One is lack of training or technical support. Another is lack of knowledge and awareness that, oh, this is something I should use. This would be useful to me, right? They don't see themselves necessarily using them. Part of that is a marketing issue. Some new technologies are marketed just to younger adults, and older adults don't see why it might be useful to them. There's also frequent changes in technology that they might find difficult to keep up with. Often there are usability issues or system complexity or features, so many features that they don't need or want that might be a barrier. And of course, cost. We have to always consider that as a potential barrier. One of the things that we have found repeatedly, though, if the older adults understand why that particular technology might be useful to them, they're more likely to accept it. And so what I want to do now is give a couple of examples from our own research of things that we're exploring. I'll give 3 different examples. I was telling one of my colleagues last night I had a hard time.
You need a Milwaukee? What's that? It's a Milwaukee? Oh, no, I thought that was something.
Sorry, somebody's talking about Milwaukee. I don't think it was me. I was having a hard time deciding what to focus on. We do a lot of different research in our lab. I chose 3 to focus on today just to introduce you to some of the different things that we do. So first, this is a new term I just learned, digital therapeutics, which I like it. M-health used to be the term. I don't know if this is becoming a more commonly used term, but we have a system that is, I'll show you a little bit about what the goal is, but the purpose of this project is to improve hypertension medication adherence for older adults. And this is funded by the National Institute of Nursing Research. And my co-PI on this project is actually a pharmacist. She's a Ph.D. pharmacist. I'm going to pause for a second. So the system is called MEDS-REM, Medication Education. You'll find my point of medication education, decision support, reminding, and monitoring system for the management of hypertension. So it's designed to be a coach, and it's MEDS-REM 2 now because we're on the 2nd iteration of this system, where we're trying to enable people to enter their medications into the system using optical image capture. We want to provide medication-specific education. When people go to websites that have information about hypertension, it's overwhelming, right? I don't need to know all the possible medications I might take. I need to understand more about mine. Another important issue is what to do if I missed a dose. So we're setting up our system to provide decision support in real time. Okay, I was supposed to take it at 8 o'clock, it's now 12:30. Should I take it? Should I wait until the next one? And my pharmacist colleague has developed a formulary based on different medications about what's the safe window, so we know what advice to give them. We also have a personalized reminder schedule. We're going to be linking as well their adherence with their actual blood pressure readings. And we have some members of our team developing visualizations for the older adults to see how well they're adhering, how that's relating to their blood pressure. And the system has both a mobile app as well as a web portal. And these are just a couple of shots of what the app is going to look like. we're going to encourage them to set up their reminders where they link taking medication with an activity, because we know that that is the most effective way to remember. So we'll have reminders, we'll have tracking where we can see how well they're doing, which medication maybe they're missing, or maybe they always miss on Saturday. You know, what are they doing on Saturday that they should change? So our system has both a mobile app and a web portal. And we're setting up to do a randomized controlled trial. And one of the things that I think is often the case in technology research is they design the technology, but then don't test the efficacy of the technology. And we're really trying to move in that direction by doing these RCTs. And I mentioned on our team is a pharmacist. Also, we have a Ph.D. nurse who developed the original intervention, human factors and aging researchers, as well as a company that is designing the materials for us. So in the RCT, we have to recruit people, and then we're going to follow them and find those who are non-adherent. Our system isn't going to help somebody who's already adherent. And so we don't need to waste our time with them. They have a system, it's working for them. Good, keep doing that. But for the people who are non-adherent, then we would enroll them in our study. And so we're going to track them over 6 months. They're either going to be in the Meds Round 2 study or in the education control. And I think these kinds of studies are critical for technology advancements to show that this app, this system, it's more than just an app, this system actually improves medication adherence. The reason we started this project, as I mentioned, my nurse colleague, Kathy Insel, she had shown the value of a nurse providing support over time to enable people to adhere better. And she approached me and said, you know, we don't have the resources to have nurses be that engaged. Do you think there's a way to use technology to augment what the nurse had traditionally been doing? And that's what started in this whole project. So right now we're in the stage of finalizing the system, and we're planning to start the RCT at the end of next year. The second example I want to focus on relates to social engagement. We've been hearing a lot about this recently, but this is not a new phenomenon in terms of concern for older adults being lonely. So this report actually came out last year, published by the Health Resources and Services Administration, and they talked about what they call the loneliness epidemic, that nearly 1 out of 3 older Americans now lives alone, and this has implications for health. And they reported these statistics that have really been in the news quite a lot, especially the third one. The first thing they said was that 43% of seniors reported feeling lonely on a regular basis. And of those, 45%, there was a 45% increased risk of mortality for those who felt lonely. But this is the one that I kept seeing in the news, that loneliness is more dangerous than obesity and as damaging to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, I haven't gone back to see where they pulled that statistic out, but it's a striking just way of thinking about this, that this is an issue of concern. With one of my postdocs and a graduate student, we did a review of the literature related to social engagement. We were particularly focused on technology, but as by way of background, we looked at, well, why is social engagement so important? And is it really that important for health? And the literature is quite interesting, that higher levels of social engagement for older adults are associated with reduced hypertension, decreased development of dementia, increased mental health and psychological well-being, as well as reduced mortality rates. And so there's a body of literature that is pointing to the importance of social engagement for health outcomes. And so in this project, we're partnering with a company called OneClick.chat, and we received an SBIR, Small Business innovation research grant from the National Institute on Aging. And this first grant was on supporting social engagement through technology for older adults with and without mild cognitive impairment. Turns out that the likelihood of being more socially isolated is higher for individuals who have cognitive impairment. And they're often not included in technology interventions. And so we wanted to make sure we incorporated them in our study. The one-click.chat system is by name, right? It's meant to be very easy to use, and literally you just have to press a button. You don't have to download anything. It's web-based, and it provides the same kind of social interaction that we can get here: voice, facial expression, body language. The old users need a computer and an internet connection, but they don't need to download any software, and it's meant to be streamlined and easier to use by older adults. And so this is what it looks like. This is one of our events from the study that we did last year, where you get an event. Here's an event on art that's happening at a particular day and time, and you just have to click join the event. And you get connected with other people for a conversation about that topic. So it's an opportunity to participate in discussion groups and to connect with people who have shared interests, not necessarily people you already know. All right, a lot of the focus on social interaction research is connecting people with their family and friends, but it's also nice, like we're doing today, right? We're connecting with other people that we don't know, but we have shared interests. And the older adults we interviewed were very interested in being able to use the system for learning new things, right? And just expanding their horizons. So in the first phase, we focused on three aims. First was to identify facilitators and barriers to the adoption of this specific video chat platform for older adults with and without mild cognitive impairment. And then we improved it. So we, based on human factors tools that we have, we redesigned it, we iteratively tested the usability to make sure that they could use it. And importantly, we developed the instructions and support that they would need to be able to use it in their own home. And that's what we tested in aim 3, was to explore the potential engagement benefits for this system. And we implemented it in their homes for a 4-week experiential field trial. And we measured, did they use it? Did they like it? Did it work well? Just a small scale feasibility study, which is what a phase 1 is all about. This project has recently been published. It's just come out, and it gives that whole process of how do we go from the original version to optimizing it for this particular user population. And then we were fortunate to be funded with a phase 2. And in a phase 2 SBIR, the focus is on efficacy. Okay, they can use it. Does it work? Does it really improve their lives? And so this one is enhancing quality of life for older adults using this video technology. This is with one click, and my colleague Raksha Mudar in speech and hearing science here at University of Illinois. So what we're doing in the phase 2, this has just gotten started. We're going to revise and refine the platform, the one-click platform, developing some additional content in our protocols. But here again, we're doing this RCT to determine whether it's effective for older adults. And we'll be following them for 12 weeks and measuring social engagement, quality of life, user acceptance, and also subjective stress. The other part of this study, so this is enough in and of itself, is to do this RCT, but we also want to make sure that the product will scale, right? That others will adopt it and use it. Let's suppose we do find it to be effective, which we think it will be. We want to partner with home and community-based organizations so that they can use it for their clients. And so in our other aim that we're doing is to work with them to develop content and a dashboard for them to make it easy for them to develop their own events targeted to their clients. And then the last aim will be, we'll be focusing on the scalability and the commercial potential of it. And that's one of the goals of SBIRs. They're trying to commercialize ultimately these products that are being developed. I think these partnerships between the universities and the industry partners are a great way for us to advance both science and the practice of designing technology to help older adults. Okay, my third topic is robotics. This is a growing area here at the University of Illinois as well as elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of potential being the operative word, for robots to support successful aging. And we need to think about the different components. What is the robot going to need to do? It's going to have to communicate with the humans in some way. Maybe it needs to show emotions, perform tasks for the person. It needs to be trustworthy. We know these things from our previous research. It needs to have an appearance that people like, and potentially provide social support. And we've been looking at several different types of robots, telepresence robots that are illustrated over here on the right. Also assistive robots, like a mobile manipulator, which is illustrated here at the top. And I'm going to show you a couple of our current projects, as well as social robots like Paro, which is shown over here with me. We're focusing also on socially assistive robots as one area, and this is that intersection between assistive robots that do something for you and socially interactive robots that communicate with you in some way. One of my students, Megan Bales, right now is doing her master's thesis looking at older adults' attitudes and opinions and acceptance about these kinds of robots and what influences their decisions about what they would want in their home. It turns out it depends on what the robot looks like, what it's going to do for them, perhaps even their own experiences. We're also exploring what are called, this was another new term. One of the fun things about collaborating, I'm always learning new terms and ideas, is a morphologically switching service robot configuration. It's a mouthful. This is a collaboration with my colleague here and Granger College of Engineering, Girish Krishnan. And in my mind, what makes this clear is this picture right here. A morphological switching robot means that it can have a rigid component, but it can also have a soft component. And in some situations, you need the rigid arm, but in other, like if you need to reach up very high, you need a rigid arm. But once you get there, so think about this, reaching for something off of a high shelf, you need the softer, more flexible part of the robot to be able to get the item that you're after. So this is a technical challenge that they're trying to solve, is how you combine these different components. And as Girish has pointed out, there's the other benefit is the softer arm component may be better to have in closer proximity to the person that's interacting with the robot. It may be safer. So we're exploring these ideas. We're working on, we just had a meeting last night thinking about a new direction for this. The other robot that we're working with is called Stretch, which is designed by a company called Hello Robot by my colleague that I worked closely with when I was at Georgia Tech, Charlie Kemp, and Aaron Edsinger. And this is us when we unboxed Stretch in the Life Home. And it's controlled by a game controller. And here I am trying to control it. I am not good at controlling it yet. And that's part of what we need to explore is how would we expect an older adult to be able to control this robot? Where we've submitted a grant with the team to look at different types of interfaces that might be easier for people to use. But if you're good at using a game controller, here's my colleague Harshal Mahajan was able to pick up a pen from the floor. So it has a lot of precision. And we just need to think about how to harness that to make it easier for people to use. And so different things we've been doing in the Life Home, it can pick up a bottle, it can turn on a light switch, pick up the sprayer from the faucet, and open it cabinet doors. And this is what we could do with it the first day when we took it out of the box. And so in this research, we're going to be exploring different end effectors that might enable you to do different things, as well as I mentioned, the key thing is different ways of controlling the robot to get it to perform. So that brings us to the life home. That's where some of those pictures were taken. That's our first research project that we're doing in the life home. Harshal Mahajan, who I mentioned, is the Assistant Director of Research, and Brian Pastor helps us out here as well. This is the architectural drawing, and I'm pleased to say that it's now an actual building. We took this picture when it was still snowing, as you can tell. So the McKechnie Family Life Home, the McKechnie's names this facility, and LIFE stands for Living in Interactive Future Environments. And this is a multi-purpose research and collaborative space that's going to enable research on home activities and support for people of all ages, all abilities. It has a home simulation space, which is the orange. Up here, I'm going to take you on a virtual tour and show you these a little bit more closely. But it has a home simulation area. It has space for events and community engagement with a gathering hall and a conference room. And then we have development spaces, the Health Technology Innovation Lab. So let me walk you through the different spaces to show you what it looks like. These are actual renderings from the furniture company that helped us outfit the home, but the home is now furnished. We just haven't had a professional in yet to take pictures, but this is what it looks like. So we have living space, dining space, and kitchen area where you can simulate all kinds of in-home activities and test out new technologies. We have 2 bedrooms. One is set up as a home office. The second one will be set up as a bedroom. The bed is on order. And this allows us to simulate different types of activities, including telework, which we're all now very familiar with, but things like wheelchair transfer, smart lighting, all kinds of activities that take place in these rooms. There's an observation and control center. Let me show you up here in the floor plan. And this has one-way mirror that allows you to look into the dining space and into one of the bedrooms. But also, we've now outfitted the entire home simulation area with cameras and microphones. We also have cameras in the Health Technology Innovation Lab and in the other spaces, the other research spaces that I'll show you in just a minute. So all of that will be controlled in this space right here, the Observation and Control Center. There are collaborative spaces, as I mentioned. We have a conference room and a gathering hall. One of the things that we did, you see this glass wall over here to the right, that's accordion doors, so that all opens up so you can have a bigger space for events. The remote access lab is a place that will enable us to test telehealth, telerobotics. You could imagine simulating, maybe this is where a healthcare provider is working with somebody who's in the home simulation area. So it enables us to simulate these telepresence types of situations. We also have the Arthur G. Fisk interview room, which provides space for qualitative research assessments and mixed methods. We have camera and audio in this room as well. We have the Health Technology Innovation Lab. This is completely reconfigurable space that enables us to hold some classes or maybe hackathons or design competitions. It's completely flexible space for development activities. So where are we today? The building is there. We're finalizing the technology infrastructure in terms of the video cameras and the software system. We're outfitting it with smart technology throughout. We're completing the decor of the home simulation space because we really want it to look like a home when you go into it to have that true simulation. And so we'll be ready for collaboration in January 2021. So we're finalizing things now. We're using it internally for a couple of projects, as I showed you with the stretch robot. And we're also hosting the inaugural MS Health Technology students this semester with proper social distancing. So this is what I was showing you, that we could open out the conference room and all of the tables are 6 feet apart. And so we're able to have our students be there in person and then also do Zoom collaborations with others. So let me tell you a little bit more about the MS in health technology. We need to think about all these topics I've been discussing. Where's the workforce development, right? We need students who are going to receive training in this intersection of health technology and human factors beyond aging. My personal focus is on aging, but this is a much broader question. And so the health technology program is across all ages and abilities. This really started with an initiative. It's a collaborative project with the Granger College of Engineering and my colleague Kesh Kesavatis and Jeff Woods. They really are the instigators behind all of this. They're the ones who recruited me to come here to begin with, and we worked very closely together on these initiatives. And we're fortunate that Nicole Holtzclaw-Stone joined us as the assistant director. And we've also been excited to grow. We have Tim Hale, who teaches some of our courses. Young Hu is our research assistant. I've already introduced Harshal to you. Shannon Mahea is a faculty member, as is RS. Shannon's in community health, RS is in engineering, as is Abby Wooldridge. So we're gradually growing our faculty and staff. The home department for the master's degree is in kinesiology and community health, but it's in collaboration with the Department of Industrial and Enterprise Systems Engineering. But it's even more than that. We have memoranda of understanding from all of these departments in engineering, as well as the other 2 departments in applied health sciences, speech and hearing sciences, and Department of Recreation, Sport and Tourism. True interdisciplinary program. I'm also excited about our advisory board. So we have people from various sectors related to health technology. I won't go through them all in detail. You can look at our website, but I want to circle all the ones in orange have a degree from the University of Illinois. So either an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree from the University of Illinois. So they're very supportive of what we're doing. And let me just show you briefly what the structure of this master's degree looks like. It's a 1-year intensive. And so the students in their first semester, right now, they're powering through a heavy course load. So they're taking a course on understanding users, a course on human factors methods, a course on software engineering, their capstone project orientation, as well as an elective. So it's a very intensive semester. And then in the spring, they'll take a hardware engineering course, continue with the capstone, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, and then 2 electives. And then next summer, they'll do their capstone project. So 1 year, very intensive. What's unique about it is this mixture of behavioral science, human factors, engineering. So these students are going to have a very strong core knowledge base. The capstone is a 3-semester project in a sense, but it really gets carried out in the summer. So this semester, Nicole and I are co-teaching the orientation where we're introducing, in fact, this afternoon, we have our first 2 pitch events from potential capstone sponsors. The students will be matched with a sponsor this semester, and then Tim Hale and I will co-teach the project development in the spring, where they'll be putting their ideas together, getting necessary approvals if they need IRB, putting everything into place so that in the summer, they devote their attention to carrying out the capstone project. And so this year, we're really thrilled to have 7 students. Our goal was 5 for the first year, and Starting a new program in the midst of a pandemic was quite a challenge, but we're thrilled that we have 7 students who are meeting in person on campus. Steve was mentioning earlier how fortunate we are that the University of Illinois has been able to be on campus. We have 7 capstone sponsors from AARP and a new company called Servium that works in long-term care communities, State Farm, University of Chicago Medicine, and 3 Illinois faculty members, Harshal Mahajan, who's in kinesiology and community health, Mary Petrowitz, who's at the Applied Research Institute, and Abby Woodridge, who's in engineering. Hopefully, there'll be a lot of Carle, Illinois College of Medicine folks doing capstones in the future. It's part of why I wanted to talk about this today, is you can think long-term. You can think about what's a project that I don't have time to devote to right now, but this is a place I want to go, and think about that as opportunities for capstone projects. So we're hoping next year to double our class size. Our plan was to ramp up with the ultimate goal of having 30 students each year. And so we're actively recruiting for next year. This is a picture of Nicole recruiting last year. Most of our recruitment events this year are virtual, but that's actually working in our favor because we're able to participate in a lot of recruiting events around the nation, whereas we might not have been able to travel to all of them. So I presented a lot of information, and I'd like to just end here with a picture of my team. We're continuing to have our meetings via Zoom, and we told everybody it was picture day, so everybody tried to wear orange or something Illinois on this day. And so here is my email address if you have questions, and also our lab website if you want to look more at what we're doing. So with that, let me stop sharing. Okay, turn it back over to you, Steve.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Professor Rogers. I think there's just so much going on, and it was great to kind of hear all aspects that you're doing here, and so many centers that are evolving around this. I can understand why acronyms are so important, right? But we have a number of questions in the chat that I can get to, and then we can also open it up for people just to verbally unmute yourself and ask questions. Actually, one of the first questions I had when you were presenting, when you were talking about the activities of daily living, and I was wondering in terms of should digital communications now be considered one of those activities of daily living because it's so pervasive in what we do. You had mentioned maybe that's part of the enhanced, ADLs. But I'm just curious in terms of how important, right, even for all older adults to be connected in some way and be able to communicate digitally.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, we talk about what's called the digital divide, where older adults are not as exposed or have as ready access to technologies, but it's critical. And we can think about those technologies as supporting all different types of activities. So some will support the ADLs. Some of the robotics work, for example, can help with feeding and transfer. And IADLs, our medication adherence, is an IADL, and the video chat, that's an EADL. So thinking about technology across all of those activities, I think, is really important.
Very good. Yeah. So there was a funny comment that said you started by noting that you wear many hats, but yet you weren't wearing one today.
I should have. That's funny.
But perhaps related to that, how do you juggle so many of these aspects and centers and topics and areas? That would be maybe interesting to share.
Well, and that's why I showed the picture of my awesome team at the end. That's how I juggle. And I try to call out all the great folks that I work with. I love to collaborate, and there are such amazing people here at the University of Illinois that I've been here now. I'm in my 4th year. So I've been, building my networks and branching out. And yeah, I think it's just, it takes teams and outstanding students and postdocs.
Agreed. Very well. A related question, or from the same person. So does dementia occur less in those who are multilingual?
That's an interesting question. I can't answer with confidence about the literature on that. I know there were some studies suggesting that people who were multilingual were less likely to have dementia, but I don't want to say that with confidence. That's a little outside my area.
Okay. Another question then, someone is interested in hearing how impaired judgment, such as being under influence versus dementia, impacts the technology development.
Ah, interesting. I think that's a great way to think about the idea that even if you don't have dementia, you have situations where your judgment is impaired. Maybe you're fatigued, maybe you're on medication, maybe you're under the influence of alcohol, or it's a combination of factors. And so thinking about how to design to make something usable for people who do have cognitive impairment actually makes it easier for everybody to use. So that's part of our suggestion to designers is see if older adults or individuals with some impairment can use your technology. That increases the likelihood that everybody will be able to use it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I had another question somewhat related to that. So we talk a lot about the newest technology. So touchscreen smartphones, for instance, right? And the training of those older adults to use those. But is it maybe more effective to provide an older, more familiar interface and then hide the technology behind that? So for instance, I use the example of the phone. So the rotary dial phone is very familiar with many, but many of the older adults can't use a touch screen smartphone, for instance. So is it more effective to maybe present an older technology or user interface, right, that's more familiar?
That's a great question. A couple of different things I think about. So one is we do try to use metaphors. So when we're teaching people how to use something, we can use a metaphor for a system that they're familiar with, and that might help them make that transition. With respect to providing older form factors, I fear that they end up being left behind, or they also end up only being able to use that thing that's made for old people, right? And I think what you want them to be able to do is to use the same technologies that all of us want to be able to use. So I think it's a good thought, and I really don't have a certain answer one way or the other. It's something to think about.
Okay, thank you. One person asked, how do you measure quality of life? They said in a study reference at the end of your second example, but I think maybe just the general question, how do you measure quality of life?
Yeah, good question. We use this, there are standard measures, believe it or not. The WHO has developed something called the brief quality of life measure that we use, and it just has kind of general questions about life satisfaction and enjoyment. It's a standard set that's a validated, reliable measure. They're out there.
Okay, very good. And someone's asking if they can see a demo of the one-click system. Is that available?
You go to the oneclick.chat, and one of the things the company did, which I thought was awesome, is they allowed during the pandemic people to set up free accounts. So if you go to oneclick.chat, you can actually set up your own account and start using it. Okay,
very good. Someone's curious about the color scheme for the living room in your smart home.
Did you note the blue and the orange? Or, we did try to go with the Illinois colors.
Yeah, well, one thing I was noticing too is the furniture and settings were all very modern and clean cut, and there was no clutter. And thinking about, the homes that I've seen of many older adults, is that's not usually the case.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm curious, how do you account for that, like clutter and maybe, other older furniture that maybe doesn't have that accessibility?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. What we tried to do is balance. So we didn't want it to look like a home of the future. It is a modern style, but it's furniture that could be in any one of our homes. So that was something we were aiming for, is standard furniture. but it is very clean. And so the way I like to think about the life home is things may be developed, excuse me, in a lab or an industry. The life home is a way for us to test it in a simulated home environment before we go out into the world where it's where people actually live and there's a lot of clutter. So we could also simulate the clutter, right? And we'll do that. I'm working with another person, Katie Driggs Campbell, here in engineering, and she's interested in navigation robots. And that's going to be one of the challenges, right? Is how do you navigate a cluttered environment? So we'll probably end up simulating a cluttered environment in the life home to be able to test that out.
Very good, very good. Some people are interested in finding out, are you currently recruiting older adults for your randomized controlled trial?
Okay, so we're currently recruiting for a number of different studies, both the RCTs, the one-click will be recruiting in February, and then the MedsRem app, we won't be recruiting till later next year.
Okay. And is that maybe contact you then, or is there a website for that?
The chart website, we have listed the studies for which we're currently recruiting. So we do have, I think we have 2 or 3 studies up there right now. One that anybody might be interested in is a survey of smart technology. How do people use technologies in their home, and what they do and do not use. Okay.
So I think the last question in the chat, and then we can open it up for others, is what are your thoughts in terms of accessibility of some of the amazing in-home technology for populations of low income and from various diverse cultural backgrounds?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And for the one-click project, just as one example, my colleague Raksha Mudar and I received a seed grant from Discovery Partners Institute up in Chicago, and we're partnering with CJE Senior Life, which is a group that supports 20,000 older adults in the Chicago area. And we're testing out the feasibility of teaching older adults who've never used computers how to use that system. And we're in one of their facilities that didn't even have internet. We were able to provide internet to everybody that lives in that facility. And now we're teaching them to be able to use our system. So accessibility is a really important issue. We're learning that a lot of companies offer discounts for internet access for low income. And I think it has to be top of mind. We have to think about how do we make these technologies available to broad users. Absolutely important.
Thank you. One more question popped up. So what are the ethical aspects of your work that you grapple with every day?
That's a great question. There are a lot of issues related to privacy and security. Let me touch on those first. So one of the things I try to think about is how do I make sure the older adults understand what's being done? You're going to put some technology in their home or on their person. How do you make sure they really fully understand what it's doing, how they can control it, how can they turn it off if they want to? So those issues of privacy and security are really important. Another ethical issue is this idea that technology is going to replace humans, and we in no way want to do that. We want to think about augmenting, right? We want to augment the capabilities of an individual, or if you don't have a care provider there right now, how might a robot be able to serve that role? And those are important ethical issues that we need to make sure that we're aware of. And there are probably many more, but those are the ones that immediately come to my mind.
Very good. Thank you. So let me open it up then to others. If you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask them for Professor Rogers.
This is Dr. Jan. Good to see you, Wendy.
You too.
This might be a little bit in the weeds, but for the study that had to do with medication administration and adherence, you'd indicated that you would not be looking at the group that was more adherent because you're really interested in getting the non-adherent group to be more adherent. But how do you know your product or the product that's being used isn't cumbersome enough that even an adherent group wouldn't use that technological innovative app or whatever, and and thus it'll look like the product isn't that effective. In other words, if in the adherent group, only 60% of the people are actually using the technology in a way that shows that they're adherent, the results that you get, that maybe 30%, will look even worse. I don't know if you've already done a pilot to show that adherent groups, they use this app 100% of the time and it's not an issue, or...
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's part of what we're going to figure out. We're hoping to have a large enough sample that we can actually look at subgroups, right? And so you'll do an intention to treat assessment, but then you could also say, okay, is there a relationship between actually using it and successful adherence, and try to tease that apart? Because that's an issue with all technology intervention, well, all interventions really, but with respect to technology, it's not going to help them if they don't use it. And in some of my previous work, we found that there are groups of people, like maybe they start using the technology and then they say, nah, I'm not going to use it anymore. Or they don't even start using it, or they use it for 6 months or 6 weeks. And so that's part of what we're hoping to learn in this trial, are these patterns of use. And there are very few studies in the technology realm that really look long-term at how people use or stop using health technologies over time. And that is, you're right, that's one of the challenges of showing the effectiveness of this technology.
I'm kind of curious about bias in your studies. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with older adults and done a lot of research in that area. And I'm just really, but more from the standpoint of legal issues. But I'm really curious of when you're recruiting your samples and the people who are participants, how do you avoid bias of things like levels of trust and those sorts of harder to calculate and create objective measures of in your sample people?
It's a good question. I think that two, three maybe things that we try to do. One is group broadly, and that's part of our reason for spreading our wings up into Chicago. I still collaborate with folks in Atlanta, so trying to recruit a broad range of people. You will have folks who sign up and say, well, yeah, I want to be in this technology study because I like technology. And so it's something you have to be aware of in your generalization, right? And so what we also do is measure. We have measures of, I showed you one about the mobile device proficiency. We measure technology attitudes, anxiety about technology experience, so that we can at least report the characteristics of the people who participated. And then I think the third thing is the idea of doing these RCTs. I think that's one of the values, is they're assessed and then they're randomized into the technology condition or the non-technology condition. The risk with that is my previous RCT that we did with my CREATE colleagues, participants either got a computer system or the control condition. The people that got assigned to the control condition said, well, I don't want to participate. I wanted to get the computer. And so what we had to do for them is to do a wait list and say, okay, after the end of the study, we'll teach you how to use the computer and then you'll have access to it. So it's a good question. There are a lot of different components of that you have to think about.
Thank you.
Other questions?
All great questions, helping me think.
I had another question, Dr. Jan, again, for the one-click chat where you have older adults interacting with other people they don't know. The concern I have, for my mom talking to people that call randomly at the phone is how do we protect those individuals from disclosing personal information or being taken advantage of, those sort of things.
Yeah, that's a good example of one of the other ethical issues that we need to think about. So in the short term, where it's going to be, it's controlled access, and so they would only be interacting with other people who were in the research study. So that's in the short term. For the expansion to working with health and community-based organizations, same thing. They would control access to other clients. But that doesn't preclude these kinds of things possibly happening. So what we're exploring with the one-click company is a reporting method, is a way to say that somebody's being disruptive or they're asking inappropriate questions, as a way to report other users. But then Raksh and I have also talked about, we're going to be doing some training about what to do and what not to do in terms of sharing of information. So trying to control their identity, trying to educate them about what they should and should not share, and then giving them an opportunity to report if they feel uncomfortable at a particular moment in time. A lot of issues that we need to address, but I think the potential benefits outweigh the cost if we can figure out how best to do that.
Thank you.
I had one question too. I know there's a lot of, you've heard a lot of terms used around personalized medicine, but, I was struck and really you emphasized the point of how each, aging adult really has an individual story, right, and needs. And so it's almost this personalized aging approach, right, that you have to think about, right, and to accommodate. It's not a one size fits all, and there's so many factors that go into this, and it changes over time. So there's a lot of, but I think what you're doing in terms of trying to integrate all these different aspects is really what's necessary here to help.
I might steal that term, Steve. Personalized aging. I like
personalized
that.
Aging. Right.
In some of our other studies, what's under review right now for the next round of CREATE is really thinking about adaptive technologies that, given your changes over time, but also, especially for people with cognitive impairment or physical impairment, there are changes within a day. There are bad days, good days. I'm better in the morning than I am in the afternoon. And trying to think about how can we design technology that's not only personalized, but it's really adaptive to that moment. That was a real challenge.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Very good. Any last questions? This has been really, I think, a good discussion.
Yeah, fun.
Well, if not, thank you so much for all those that have added questions to the chat, to those that have asked those questions. And thank you very much, Professor Rogers. This has been really helpful and really insightful for many of the people attending here. I know we had an audience that was new and from outside the university, and we really extended this to a broader audience. And I think many people gained from that. So
great.
Thank you again.
My pleasure. Nice to see everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the weather.
Yeah, while it lasts.
While it lasts.
Dr. Jan, nice to see you. I was just talking about you yesterday, so it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. You're doing great work. I'm glad to see it moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard to believe I'm in year 4. I think I met you when I first arrived.
Yeah, that's time does go too quickly, but boy, you've done quite a bit in that time.
Thank you. They keep me busy, that's for sure.
Well, if I can ever be of assistance, let me know.
I may be in touch soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Great. Thanks, Angie, for organizing, keeping me on track.
Thank you.
Wendy, Wendy, I'm Jessica Breitbarth. I'm the Associate Dean of Advancement for the college. And Steve and I would love to kind of touch base with you on some potential opportunities. But personally, I really enjoyed this. I ran a legacy and plan giving program at 2 different institutions. I've done capstone projects around that. I was an estate planning attorney. And so aging in place has always been a big issue for my clients and then my donors. And now here at the College of Medicine, of course, it's also very important. Love to have coffee sometime.
Sure. Yeah. Someday we can do that in person, or we can Zoom in the
do it over. You can do it virtually. Yep. So, anyway, really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your question. It's great.
And I really enjoyed hearing about the Health Technologies Master's Program too, because and your mention of the capstone project there, because similarly for the College of Medicine, our students, in their last phase will have capstone projects, and those are meant to be team-based. We're encouraging them to reach out, right, to other colleges and and faculty to really create a team of expertise around their ideas. And so that seems like a natural interface between capstone projects.
Absolutely. And, Kesh and I talked about that a little bit, and Jeff, because they're involved in your college, to try to think about how best to do that from the beginning. Part of the challenge is the timeline. So you saw what our timeline is. How does your capstone work?
Yeah, those capstone projects, they're year long, and it's in the last phase of our curriculum, which generally will be from March until the next May. So it's roughly about 14 months or so duration. And then that happens every year. So that's a sort of a year long, but it overlaps with the academic year.
Yeah. So your people would be starting when my people are finishing, because our folks do it in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But lots of projects, there are multiple phases, so I think that, and a lot of what our folks can do is at the front end. I didn't talk too much about this today, but a lot of what we do is needs assessment, right? And what exactly does the user need? Who are your new users? Understanding that early part could be very helpful for your capstones who are then going to develop something later.
Yeah. And we expect, even though they are starting in March, it's going to take several months just to build the team and think about the problem. And so, they may just be ramping up at the start of the fall semester. So I think there's enough overlap that we should continue to think about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And for faculty as well, just in general, if they have projects and they want to sponsor a capstone, is a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
we were
good.
happy to get a class this year. It was a long time when we were holding our breath. We had one student, and we ended up at 7, which is really great because it's learning year anyway, so we're testing things out. And
yeah, very good. I missed, where exactly is the Life Home located on campus? Is it Research Park or?
It's near Research Park. We're sort of on the edge of Research Park. It's back behind the credit union, on First Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to go
Near
by.
the car sports clinic there.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah. So we're happy to set up a tour. We're now at a point where there's something there and you can see things. So, anytime you want to bring a group, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to step off. I didn't know if others wanted to chat more, but thank you again.
Hey, thanks
Wendy.
for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you, Wendy.